This podcast is a prime example of why I can't record anything scripted because of the fact that I can't remember anything. And I have a job interview. Well, not a job interview, but I'm going to be going for a new position at my work. And then that interview is going to be either tomorrow or Sunday because I work the weekends, as you guys know. And I'm kind of quickly realizing that when I try to memorize things in a scripted pattern, I can never do it on the spot or just recall it at all without having to really stop and think. So I think what I want to do is touch briefly about that, and then we will see where things go from there. So with that, welcome to this week's episode of Divergence and Divine. My name is WIllspiration, and like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about scripted pattern, not scripted patterns, but scripted scripts, basically. I know that doesn't make sense, but I couldn't think of it. Now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, it makes sense, rehearsed scripts. That's what I was thinking. That's what I was trying to say. But I notice for me, when I try to rehearse a script or try to come up with some sort of script in my head, it never works. I'm always sitting there trying to recall what I'm supposed to say, or when oh yeah, I'm supposed to answer this question like this. And I find that to be very just hard in general because it puts me on the spot and it forces me to go from being present in the conversation to going inside my head and going, oh, well, this person asked me this. I can answer it like this. I can answer it like this, or I can answer it like this. Whereas neurotypicals, they can study a script and memorize it and then be able to pretty much recite it almost perfectly. And it's people would be like, oh, wow, you're so, amazing. And the whole thing could be a load of, bullshit that they just made up. And it just sounds so believable and so real because they remembered it. They memorized it word for word, inflection, tone, rhythm, cadence, and everything. So it kind of makes me wonder if this is if it's an ADHD issue, is it an autism issue, or is it both, where it's just kind of it occurs in both. And if you have both like me, then it's just even worse. So I'm just sitting here thinking it's a good thing that the position that I'm applying for, I already have more than enough knowledge on to hit the ground running. So that's really good. And I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to answer questions in the interview if I don't know how to answer them? But then I have to also remember too that the reason why I'm going for this position is because I already know more than what I should as a packer. And I already know how to run lines, essentially, at least the basics, like troubleshooting, turning on, a machine, knowing what some of the alarm errors are on the machine, so I know what's wrong with it, and be oh, okay, well, I just do this, this, and this, and then I hit this button, and it boop, okay, time to, machine keeps running, right? So I'm trying to sit there and not overthink the whole thing, oh, how am I going to answer if they ask me this? And then I kind of realize it's just easier to wing things. That was the whole goal of this podcast was I was oh, well, I'm going to have, predetermined topics. And then I kind of quickly realized, unless I have a topic that's really on my mind, that it's yes, I am dedicating this episode to this topic specifically, I can never think of anything that comes to mind until literally moments before I hit the record button. So I don't know if that's just a me thing. I don't know if that's just an autism thing, if that's just an ADHD thing, or if that's an ADHD thing, or if it's just exclusive to me specifically. But I always have had issues just memorizing things in general when it comes to writing something down and then being okay, I take notes, I study the notes, or I read a chapter in a textbook and nothing sticks in my brain, right? Absolutely nothing sticks in my brain. And I'm just I don't get it. I'm I could read something 20 times and it just doesn't stick. But if I do something in a physical manner, It's like, boom, it literally becomes muscle memory after a couple times. Like I was being well, I wasn't being shown, but a line lead that was at my work that was training a packer that just became a line lead on how to do a certain, I wouldn't say command, but like basically how to jog a certain machine. That line lead still hadn't, that new line lead in training still hadn't figured it out yet, but like I was able to do it after watching this line lead do it twice. That I was just doing it by myself every time that part of the machine went down that I was working at. I just was like, oh, like I could do that. I would take out whatever jam was causing it and then jog the machine and then start it right back up like it was nothing. So that right there kind of just goes to show like, okay, I can't remember things through notes or like through like a reading paper, like, or like books or anything like that. But if you can apply a real world example to it, it will become muscle memory after a couple times. It was like when my dad was trying to teach me how to dribble a soccer ball and how to, kick a soccer ball in a professional way, or at least in a high level athlete way. And my dad was like, well, you got to do this and this and this. And, with being on the spectrum, it's like you already have like those like motor skill issues. So you're like, basically you're just clumsy. Like it's hard to kind of understand like these complex, physical motions. And I was like tripping on myself trying to like figure out how my dad was doing all this stuff. So it was back when I was still living with my dad. Well, it was before I moved in with my dad. It was back when I was still in high school. And I was like thinking, oh, maybe for senior year, I'll join the soccer team. And that summer between junior and senior year, my dad was taking me out on his days off, which is usually only Saturday because he worked 6 days a week, because there was always like mandatory overtime in his work. And he showed me, and I didn't go outside and practice at all. I didn't do anything. I was so frustrated that I just kind of gave up, and I just literally sat inside and played my Nintendo Wii all 7 days, until the next time we went out there. And I just did it. Like I just did it. I don't know how I did it. I couldn't tell you how, but like it's almost like it just sat in my brain, and my brain digested it the way your stomach digests, like your body. Well, I shouldn't say stomach, but the way your body digests food. It literally just like broke down that information, and all of a sudden it was like, poof! I knew how to do it, and I'm like, my dad was like, "Have you been practicing?" And I told him, "No, I've been, because I claimed the basement as myself, like for myself, because I had this little room and it was next to my sister's, and I'm just like, I don't like it. I want to have my own room. So I claimed the basement because there wasn't really anything going on in the basement at that point. So I was just like, you know what? I'll take the basement. I'll take the big ass TV. The futon is my bed, and I'll just chill down there. And I told them, I was like, no, I've just been playing the Wii and playing on my laptop the whole time. I haven't gone outside once this week. And he's like, are you sure? Because you couldn't do this last week unless you were lying. And I'm like, no. I'm like, literally, I haven't gone outside at all. You can ask Grandma. I have not gone outside once at all, period. And from then on out, I kind of realized that whenever I do things physically and I can see it done physically, it makes more sense. Unless it's math. If it's math, anything past elementary school level or anything past pre-algebra really is where my brain just kind of goes like, okay, none of this makes sense. It doesn't matter how you explain it to me. I'm never going to understand, higher levels of algebra. I'm never going to understand trigonometry or calculus or, all these crazy absurd levels of math that are just like, you're never going to use in everyday life unless you're like a programmer or a coder. But when it comes to learning how to do things physically, like you just show me a couple times and I get to practice it a few times that day and I let my brain sit on it. I'll remember it forever. And that's kind of the thing that I find really interesting is I like, so no matter how many times I read a textbook, no matter how many times I take notes and read those notes, I am never going to remember it until I'm actually physically shown how to do this process. Once I'm shown how to do it and I get to practice it a few times, then it'll start to like make a little more sense. And if I just get to practice it a couple times, let my brain sit on it for a couple days, do it a little more, let it sit for a couple days, and all of a sudden it's just like, boom, I'll just know how to do it without even thinking. I can just go up to something and just do it. It was like basically how I learned how to run some of the machines at work. I just watched the line leads do it, asked a couple questions out of curiosity, and there's been many times where like on certain lines the line leads would be like, well, since you know what you're doing, I need to go, make more pallet tags, or I need to go do this, or I need to go fill out some paperwork or something. You're in charge. And it's like, oh, okay, I guess I'm in charge then. And it's like, I'm literally like, I'm a packer. Like I'm literally like bottom of the barrel, right? So that says a lot if like I can just do that. So I don't know if that's like a me thing. I don't know if that's like an autism thing, an ADHD thing, an ADHD thing. I feel like it's an ADHD thing, honestly. Like being able to do that. Because I feel like it's either an autism thing or it's like an ADHD thing. So I'm not sure. But since I'm ADHD, I kind of feel like that's kind of where that comes from. Is just like being able to do both of those. But I'm not entirely sure. So I think that's kind of like the mystery of autism and ADHD and the way they interact with each other and the way they interact separately, like, is just it's so, how do I put this? Like, it's just so fascinating because, like, everybody is different, right? Like, yeah, sure, neurotypicals are all different, obviously. Like, it doesn't matter if you're neurotypical or neurodivergent, we're all different, right? We're all human. We're the same species, but we all are different in our own way, right? Everybody's brain is like, everyone's brains develop differently, and life experiences and environmental factors and things like that ultimately shape who we are and who we become as adults. But it's just the more nuanced things of autism and ADHD, and especially when you have both, is just very interesting because it just seems like even ADHD people, there are some things that they excel at, and then there's other things that they don't. And there's times where the autism is more noticeable than the ADHD and vice versa. And then there's like people with like me where you can't really tell, aside from like the way that the way that I speak, like the stuttering, the excessive use of fillers, the like having to take a breath because like I'm talking so much that like I forget to breathe. So like it's just very weird. And it also kind of goes down to like how an autistic person might be able to handle how an ADHD person might be able to handle a high level amount of stress, but like another ADHD person can't. It's like one of those things where it's like, it's very interesting because it's like for one person the autism isn't as noticeable, but the other one it becomes more pronounced. And then there's like me where I could be on one line that's super fast and the system's lagging a little bit when I'm trying to scan out boxes, and it's just like that just stresses me out, like in a normal neurotypical stressed out way, right? Where you get irritated. You're just like, come on, hurry up. And then there's like other lines that, there's another line that I shouldn't say other line. Well, I guess I can say other lines because technically the other one is the same as the one that I usually get put on that I really can't be on because of my like having the autism. But the other one is like that. It's just there's less positions, but it's even faster, so it's even more stressful in that sense. But there are two lines that I can't be on, and when I'm on those lines, all of a sudden it's just like boom. It's like my autism becomes extremely noticeable on that line, and it's very weird. It's very weird how I can go from one line that stresses me out in the typical, like, you're stressed out kind of way, where you get irritated and aggravated with stuff because it's just things are not going in your favor. And, you got like a deadline to meet or, something like that versus how should I put this? Like, when you're trying to, it's different from that kind of stress versus like the sensory overload kind of stress where like you're shaking, you're like, you don't know when you're just going to have a meltdown and you try to push through it. And then you know that you can't do it, but you don't want to say anything. So then you keep forcing yourself to do it until you have a meltdown. And then people look at you like you're crazy. And yeah, I just don't understand how my brain can just handle one line but not another line, which is a mystery to me. And it's funny because like even some people just don't understand that. Like even scientists and therapists don't know how that's like possible because like everybody has their own way of doing things, and it's just like people are like, oh well, if you're on this line a little bit more, it'll become second nature to you and you'll know how to do it. And I'm like, no, the fuck I won't, because until everything on this line is like streamlined to the exact same speed, there's really no way that I'm gonna get this down, because that whole line that I'm thinking of specifically is just not very optimized, and there's not one like universal speed across the whole thing. Like there are 6 different components on that machine, like well, not components, but 6 different like miniature machines that kind of make up the whole line, but only 4 of the 6 are connected, sort of. 3 of them, no, 2 of them are connected for sure, and then the other 2 are connected to one of them. But if that one is not, like, does not have the red light on, it doesn't send a signal to stop the other line. So it kind of just like the other machines. So it just kind of makes it a little bit harder. And then the one on the end at the beginning of the line is like its own separate machine, not connected to the rest of the line. So that can just go infinitely. And it's just, belt speeds don't match up. And if the belt speeds don't match up, then and the carousel speed doesn't match up. And you got 2 different speeds going. My brain is trying to figure out, okay, well, this belt is already too fast for even neurotypicals to keep up with. So why haven't we slowed down this belt yet, right? If we slow it down to match the carousel speed, then it's way less stressful and we're not losing pens, and it just makes everything a lot easier to manage in that section, right? So until that line gets streamlined, it's like, and optimized, we're just going to have problems on that line. And it's just like, it's not that hard to kind of look at it and go, wow, if we just made these subtle little tweaks and streamlined everything, we could find a good speed where it's still nice and fast, but it's doable by neurotypical standards. It might still be a little bit of a struggle for like people that are on the spectrum, but it's still doable. And then everything will make a lot more sense. Then I could be on that line no problem at all as a packer. But the only way I can be on that line as an employee is as a line lead, where I kind of have a little bit of say on, how things run and who goes where. And yeah, I don't think I would have much say in like making the pitch that I have in my mind on how we can streamline everything, keep it at a good pace, and make it more manageable for everybody involved, so it's less stress, but we still have a good, consistent output without creating too much waste, would be, ideal. But I don't think they would go for that. But the point is that there are many, many ways to like go about doing things. And there's just as much as there is many, many different ways that autism and ADHD can interact within an individual. And there's actually another ADHD packer on my shift, and and it's funny because she's the same age as me, but for her, it's like her anxiety gets really bad. Like for me, my anxiety gets bad, but it's like, it's manageable. Like I can put up with it for quite a while before I have a meltdown or a panic attack. For her, it's like she needs to take her medicine right away. I forget what she said. I think it was like Klonopin, I think is what she called it. And she usually does, like, she says she does half a pill. That usually helps, but when it's really bad, she has to take the full pill, and then her anxiety just goes away. So I'm like, that's kind of like the key difference is that like I can put up with it long enough to the point where, like, if I'm gonna have a meltdown or a panic attack or a mixture of both, like, it's just gonna happen. I don't really care. And people will be like, well, why would you do that? Like, why wouldn't you, just go on medication? And to that, I say, I wish I had an answer, but I don't, because it just, for me, medication has never really done anything. A lot of anti-anxiety medications just make me, and I know I've covered this in previous episodes of the podcast, but this is something I kind of want to bring more awareness to, is that, like, for me, and it's not just me, this is like for neurotypicals and neurodivergents alike, it's like when you become, like, how should I put this? Like, when you become mellowed out because of your anti-anxiety meds, it's meant to block the feelings of anxiety, right? Not the physical symptoms of anxiety, but the emotional, like the emotion of anxiety is blocked. And the thing is that without that, some people, they don't know how to really, how should I put this? Like, you don't really know how to react to certain things. So, like, the reason why, for me, like, even when I get annoyed and I get frustrated and irritated, like, I don't sound as irritated or annoyed as I look, is because of the fact that I have anxiety. And that feeling of anxiety is linked to my sense of sympathy and empathy, because I know how I feel when people go off on me when they're stressed out and anxious and, taking their frustration out on me. So me having anxiety helps me remember that I'm probably giving anxiety to other people when I get like that, because basically what you're doing is you're just saying, I'm stressed the fuck out, I'm anxious, I'm pissed off, I'm going to take it out on you so that you know how I feel like. And then it's like a snowball effect, It's, you just roll a snowball down a hill and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. That's basically what it is. So when I am on anti-anxiety meds, I become like a total asshole. Like, if I'm not happy, I'm angry. And then a lot of my anxiety is also tied to my sadness as well. So, like, if the anxiety gets blocked, all my emotions get all fucked up and I'm either happy or angry. There's like no in between. And I feel that's the biggest issue with anti-anxiety meds, is that it turns off, it feels like it turns off your sense of sympathy. So you're just like, you don't care if you go off on someone if you're stressed. And you're just like, and they go, this is making me really anxious. And you go, someone tells you that all this stuff is making them anxious. And you go, well, tough shit. I don't care. That's not my fucking problem. And it's different when you say that when you are on meds versus when you're not on meds. Cause there's times at work where I'm like, I don't have time for this. I have other shit to do. Like, this shouldn't be my fucking problem to deal with. Versus if I was on anti-anxiety meds, I'd be like, well, this isn't my job. This isn't my fucking problem. I don't really care. And if, a line comes up and starts saying like, well, why aren't you making boxes? Or, why are you taking so long? Like, system's slow. That's not my fucking problem. Call a PRT and have them come and fix it. And that's it. And then I just keep working. Like, that is not how I am, because the other thing too is that, like, my anxiety allows me to communicate. Like, I've learned how to be communicative because of my anxiety. My anxiety has taught me how to become more emotionally available and more empathetic and sympathetic and understanding, doing my best to understand what people are going through, that if you take it away from me, I am not me anymore. And people will be like, oh, well, you rely too much on your anxiety. It's like, you should never rely on your anxiety. You need to work through your problems in therapy. And that's the thing. I do work through my problems in therapy. And it's just like, and yeah, maybe one day I could go on anti-anxiety meds and be happy and not have, not be like mad all the time. But the thing is that we have emotions for a reason. And the more we take medications for that, the more it kind of becomes an issue to relate to other people. Like, obviously, like if you need it because you're like severely bipolar or you have like schizophrenia or psychosis. But I'm just saying, like, if your bipolar is bad enough, like your mood swings, are bad enough, like you might end up like verbally abusing someone or mentally abusing someone because, your emotions are like heightened. And you know what I mean? I'm not saying that people with those mental health issues are bad. I'm just saying that if it's bad enough to where like you're going off on people and that kind of stuff, it's like you're actually hurting other people on top of like kind of hurting your own growth. So like things like that I can understand being medicated for, but like for anxiety, like I feel like anxiety is such a vital emotion to have, because that sense of anxiety and like just kind of uncertainty is how I personally feel a lot of us bond is over that stuff, because that's the key to vulnerability is like anxiety. Like when someone is like freaking out and they come to you with their problems because they don't know what to do, that shows that somebody trusts you a lot to say, hey, this is what I'm going through. Even if you can't help me, just please hear me out so I can get these thoughts out of my head for a little bit. And that's usually how you bond with people, is because of that kind of stuff. So taking that aspect away makes it we don't connect as deeply. And it's not the case for everybody. Obviously, like medication might actually help. Like maybe you take your anti-anxiety and you don't even have any issues. Like maybe you don't have any sort of resentment for, the way you were treated, which is great because that means that you have a heart of gold, and no matter how shitty people are to you, that you just don't care. You continue to live your life anyway. But in most cases, a lot of us, we don't, no matter how much we work through it, we're always going to have that cautionary side of when someone is not neurodivergent, we're not going to trust them. And also, when you take away the anxiety aspect, then you're just asking for a meltdown to go from being like crying and like rocking back and forth and like stimming to calm yourself down to like what I call an explosive meltdown, where you're very angry. You might, start hitting yourself, and self-injuring yourself out of, pure rage, throwing things, breaking stuff, because there's nothing to keep that anger in check. It's like your anxiety keeps your anger in check. And that's like the whole point, is that like, it's okay to feel. It's okay to feel, because all of our emotions are supposed to work together to keep one another in check. And I feel like that's not talked about enough. And even the Inside Out movies don't really do that topic justice as they could. But I mean, the premise is there that like we have different emotions, and that, each different emotion takes control as needed depending on the situation. But again, that's like the only thing that the Inside Out movies got right. Everything else is just kind of like, oh, well, obviously it's like a Disney and Pixar movie, so it's going to stray from the main topic a lot to make it, kid friendly. But in reality, all the emotions play off of one another. Every emotion keeps a different emotion from, elevating too far, to a certain degree. Again, if you have any sort of mental, health issues, where you have elevated moods, like if you're bipolar, for example, anything that would be along the lines of that, where you have like, just those times where like you have heightened sense of emotion. I forget what it's called. Not like I think it's called like a manic high. Like manic, like it's like called manic high levels of emotions or something like that. Or like your emotions are like super fucking strong. So like when you're happy, you're just like, like extremely happy, giggly, like nothing can bring you down. But like if you're like depressed, like if you have depression on top of it, then your depression is like so bad that like you might even consider, like unaliving yourself because it's like so bad. Then yeah, obviously medication it would help because at that point there is no balance. It's like one emotion just overrides the other. But if you don't have any mental health issues where, you have like manic highs and like depressive lows, then really it just kind of feels like medication just kind of doesn't help because it like throws off the balance of your emotions completely. And like I said before, it's like, I learned this from somebody else, but like, if you want to think about it from a metaphysical, scientific, and just, from like both perspectives, it's like we have 4 bodies. Like we have our spiritual body, our emotional body, our mental body, and our physical body, right? So we're just going to focus on the emotional and mental because while technically they both could be considered the same body, the aspects of the brain are 2 different things. We have the mental, which, is like the logical side of things and, memory and, muscle memory and bodily, function, kind of thing. Like, well, not bodily function. That's just regular brain patterns. But like, I mean, like mental is like your memory and like the way you respond to things. And then your emotional is obviously your emotions, but obviously your emotions can dictate what you do, like what your brain decides to do. Because sometimes when you're emotional, you don't think logically. So it's like, it makes sense. At least I know it may not make sense to everybody listening to this. Like you might be like, what the fuck? That makes no sense. But like, I'm literally doing my best here to like, explain how this works. And I don't think I don't know if I can really do it justice by explaining it or just even drawing like a diagram and putting it up on this video. But I feel like emotions really help balance out the actions that we take, just as much as they may be the reason why we do an action as well. But I genuinely feel like without having the anxiety, I feel like I am not me because I've essentially turned a weakness into a strength. And it's like, if you take away that strength that others, that's really, kind of what people would be like, oh, well, anxiety is kind of a weakness because, it can be crippling sometimes. But if you look at it in the right lens and you turn that, you find a way to be like, yeah, is it crippling and, it doesn't help and makes you feel worse about things? Absolutely. That's true. That's the whole point of the emotion of anxiety. But at the same time, it can allow you to understand other people better because now you're not looking at it through a, everybody hates me kind of lens. You're looking at like, if I feel this way, then like, I know other people have to as well. And obviously not everybody has generalized anxiety disorder or any sort of heightened state of anxiety because, they're on the spectrum or they have ADHD. Like, yes, neurotypicals can have generalized anxiety disorder, but without, having the autism or the ADHD, they're basically neurotypicals in a constant state of anxiety, right? But you can still bond with a neurotypical over that sense of heightened anxiety because of the fact that you're neurodivergent and you're also in that constant state of anxiety 24/7. So then it kind of gives you something to relate with to a neurotypical. Does that mean that they are not going to take advantage of you or, talk shit about you behind your back? Absolutely not. Anyone with generalized anxiety disorder that's neurotypical is just as, susceptible to becoming backstabbers and throwing you under the bus as any other neurotypical is. But at least that gives you more of an insight into their mind, because then you go, maybe they're not doing this to be an asshole. Maybe they're just doing this out of survival, and this is how they think survival should be versus, actually truly genuinely being a shitty person. So I just think that the key takeaway from today's episode is just emotions are a good thing. As long as you don't have anything that causes heightened emotions or distorts your emotions or, or the way your brain perceives things in general, emotions can be a good thing, I feel, so long as they don't get out of control. And that is why I feel like a lot of us are not very sympathetic or empathetic anymore, is because we are basically in this day and age, it's like you're told that your emotions are weak, right? It's a sign of weakness. And when you start repressing those emotions and, stuffing them down and going, well, I mean, I feel emotions, but like they're kind of, I don't really need them to get by. It's just like, no, because by suppressing your emotional body, you're essentially suppressing a part of you. And emotions are tied to authenticity. So if you're just not honest with your emotional self, then you're not being honest with yourself, and people can sense that. You don't have to be neurodivergent to be able to, sense when something is off about someone. You just have to be in tune with your spiritual body and just kind of in tune with, I guess, anything spiritual. And, that involves basically, being tied with metaphysics. It's like that's how you learn to tap into that spiritual side of things and kind of being able to tell, like, intuitively, just like something's not right about this person. The more we kind of stray away from that ability to tell when something's off about someone, the more you just kind of blindly trust everybody. And then people, you see it all the time where it's like, there's a person that's like super nice. They would never hurt a fly. And then, you see it on the news and it turns out that this super sweet person was secretly like psychotic and they went on a murder spree, like whether it be like a teenager, committing a school shooting or like a mass murderer going out and like killing 4 people in a single night for months on end before he's, finally caught. That's why it's like the fact that we've strayed away so far from being able to tap into the spiritual side of things to be able to sense when someone's off, energetically, I feel like really has hurt humanity as a whole, because now you don't know, you just kind of blindly trust and go, well, I hope that I'm right, and then you end up not being right, and it's kind of a scary thing when you get put into situations like that. So that's why I kind of encourage everyone to balance their bodies out and, do things like Reiki and meditate and, just kind of listen to music that's like 432 hertz when you meditate, or do like a sound bath, things that really kind of help get you in tune and aligned with your spiritual self more. And then obviously like leaning back into your emotions, accepting your emotions, learning that emotions aren't a bad thing, and just kind of going to therapy and like learning how to deal with things in a healthy way and developing coping mechanisms that are healthy, so that way when you do encounter things, you're not as reactive. You actually kind of think it through first before you kind of just go off the handle, that kind of stuff. So, and then exercise, obviously, like exercise, moving around, getting the blood flowing is how you take care of your physical body. So you kind of just learn how to take care of all those. And the more you get those bodies in balance, the more you kind of realize that you become more unified with yourself, that you kind of start picking up on these things, from both the physical and spiritual side of things. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this week's episode of Divergence and Divine. As always, if you guys enjoyed, make sure you drop a like, hit the sub button. If you're already subscribed, hit the notification bells, because that'll let you know when I upload new episodes of the podcast every week. And with that, I'm going to edit this, get this up as soon as possible. It's literally like 12:43, well, 12:44 now in the afternoon, and I go to bed at 9, so I got 9 hours to edit this and get it up, which it only usually takes me like 2 hours anyway. So yeah, with that, I will see you guys next week, and I hope you guys have a good weekend and a good start to your next week, and I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.